This is Morning Express. Glad that you're here with us this 16th day of September 2015. Today being a Wednesday, it's time for us to have Newsroom. And on the Newsroom, what we do, we take a look at some of the big stories, some of the headlines that we've had, how we've, whether we've done justice to some of these stories. Are there some stories that possibly should have been on the headlines and maybe were not? And that's what we do right here on the Newsroom. We members of the Fourth Estate take a look at ourselves and how we've done our job, whether we've done it effectively or not. Do remember that you are part of this panel and you can participate via Twitter. The Twitter handle is at Michael G. Gitonga. I'll introduce the panel that we have this morning, and I'll start with my extreme left, where we have Wenda Kilemi, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi, lecturing in the Communications Department. Glad to have you. Next, we have Nancy Buka, Dr. Nancy Buka, who is chair of at Multimedia University and chair with the media department. Great to have you as well.
Thank you for having me.
Then we have David Ohito, who is a digital editor here with us at The Standard. And great to have you guys. Thank you for joining us. And I'll start maybe with you, David Ohito. And the question is, which story possibly stood out for you this week?
There have been a couple of stories that stood out. One was the ongoing strike of teachers. Really a sad situation for the country. It's been there. Very difficult story to navigate because there's almost nothing newsy about the events. Teachers continue to stay away, and editors are running the challenge of reader fatigue, viewer fatigue about the teacher strike. Then we had the controversial Ipsos poll, which gave different verdicts. The poll was conducted sometime in July, and there were also factual errors which were reported.
Came out, and one wonders whether they were actually questioned.
Yes, and also the nature of questions. That's the problem I have. I think if pollsters have to make this country better, then they must make sense out of the questions they send out.
All right, we'll come back to that and data journalism. Dr. Buka, what stood out for you this week?
I think for me, one of the big stories has been the respected South Sudan journalist who has decided to, Niall Ball, who has, has decided to quit active journalism as a result of death threats. And of course, the number of journalists who have died in South Sudan this year alone, I think there are about 7. And just yesterday, I saw that this year alone, the UN has just released a report that close to 59 journalists have been killed.
Right.
And that for me is a big thing and something that warrants a discussion. Luckily, of course, the teachers' strike still making headlines. And then, of course, the Ipsos Innovate poll. Those for me have been big stories.
Okay, Wenda Kilemi?
The stories that have mattered or have been a big issue to me this last week has been the Supreme Court and the judiciary in general.
Sure. The
problems are going through. I mean, it's just not been a good month for them. So many issues coming from even yesterday when the lawyers said they're not gonna, they want all the judges to quit. To the expose that was done over the weekend, one of the papers, about the rot within the judiciary and the leadership of it, to also us still feeling the effects of their ruling on the TSC. So it's been quite a month for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, those are some of the stories that have stood out for you. And just a reminder, later on, the opposition leader Raila Odinga has called editors for a meeting, and we may be crossing live to that event which is taking place at the New Stanley, and we'll give an opportunity to see what is going on there once once we have the link and once it has started. So when the opportunity comes and when the time comes, we shall definitely cross live and give you news on what is happening. And as we were going on, now we have Patrick Gadara, who has joined us. Welcome, Patrick.
Thanks a lot.
Good to have you. Patrick Gadara is a communication consultant, also a cartoonist, and I guess drawing cartoons is also a way of communicating.
Yes, it is.
To get a message across.
Powerful way of communicating.
Powerful way of communicating, using humor and satire. And we'll be talking about cartoons later on. I've seen that the French newsroom, again, is on the spotlight using cartoons which are viewed by some as inappropriate. But we'll get back to that. But
there's also an interesting part that one of the final nominees for the award of CNN Journalist of the Year award is a cartoonist.
Is a cartoonist?
Yes.
Kenyan cartoonist.
Kenyan
cartoonist.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Patrick Gadara, maybe just to bring you onto the same level with the rest of us, what story stood out for you?
Well, I think really it's been dominated mostly by the teacher strike. I think the fact that we had waited for a sort of resolution to yesterday, and that's been pushed, I think, to the 25th to get a resolution as to whether the strike is legal or not, whether they should go back to school, and that's going to take some time. I also thought the release of the report by the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights that showed how the government is really fighting terror with terror, as they said, is accused of very many grave human rights abuses. Is one thing that I think media should really pay attention to.
Okay. Now, the meeting that's taking place that the New Stanley called by the opposition leader is basically to talk to editors on the opposition agenda. And let me start with you, Ohito, and maybe get your feel. Is it good that the opposition recognizes that media is a key player in terms of getting the agenda across and letting people understand?
Of course, you can't wish away the role of the media in getting your communication and agenda out to the public. And I think maybe they're trying to renew contacts with newsrooms. There's been a lot of movement of people within newsrooms, and maybe they also have had issues, as we saw last year, why some of their events were given a wide berth by national media, and also to look and size up and look at the stories. For example, I've heard some people complaining that when we cover the opinion polls, we target certain politicians, particularly from the opposition. Those have been some of the complaints. But I think it's also a good time to look at the challenges media has been having and what role can the opposition do. Yesterday, there was a mention of the two cases by the media against the government on the Media Act and the Kicker Act. And I think finally the hearing of those cases is going to start on 29th October. So some progress made. And finally, there is an opposition MP who has sponsored a very bad bill for the media. That is the Canaan bill. So I think if some of these issues can be discussed at that meeting,
it would be helpful.
Sure.
Buka, the media has been seen largely as the enemy of the state. Because of sometimes how we report or maybe how we pick up stories, it always looks like it's from a negative perspective. And with the opposition now coming in and bringing in media, is this likely to sway?
I wouldn't say that the media has been is an enemy of the state. I think
sometimes it is perceived.
It is perceived that way, but media is supposed to check the state, and anybody who checks the state is likely, to make the state uncomfortable, because they are the voice and they're the ones, they're the whistleblowers. Media plays that role. They're also playing the watchdog role, and so that in itself comes with with certain perceptions, and that's why in many countries the world over, media has always been looked at very differently by the state. So that is not surprising, and it doesn't mean that media should stop what it is doing, because it's supposed to bring out some of those issues, both positive and negative. But I think even looking at what has been happening in other countries, like what's happening even in South Sudan, is the intolerance, of the state, with regards to media. And I think a lot needs to be done, you know, so that that relationship is not seen as, you know, very antagonistic, but basically, you know, media playing the role of checking and you know, calling state to account when it is not doing what it is supposed to do. With the opposition, and you know, it's interesting that the opposition is meeting editors this morning, which points to the fact that I think political leaders realizing the importance of media, even in the political equation. You know, that one, media also needs to understand, you know, what's their role. And I think this is a good opportunity for the opposition to be able to put forth, you know, what their role is, and get to understand and get to know some of the editors as well. Like Ohito has said, I think there's been a lot of movement, a lot of transition, and this would be a good opportunity for them to get to meet them. The only challenge is that even when those meetings are held, that it shouldn't, I mean, you know, media then shouldn't be too cozy, you know, with the opposition or with the state. Remember when the president called editors to State House for tea? Yes, of course, there were very many people who were uncomfortable with that, and people were thinking, wow, you know, media is now getting into bed with government, and this is a little unsettling. So even when these meetings are called, I think it should be you know, for each party to understand the role of the other and to have a good working relationship. But that does not mean that media then does not, you know, call out some of the ills, whether it is by the state or by the opposition.
Okay. Mwenda Kileni, in terms of striking that balance as the media?
I think the opposition or the government should never get to a point where they say they like the media. It's a
good sign when they don't like the media.
When they don't like it, it's good. Because a lot of things will have means confronting the government or the opposition for things they do. The argument the government usually makes is that the opposition gets more favorable coverage than the government. But with this particular breakfast meeting, it also goes to show the authority of Raila. He's a very powerful figure till today. And so also media goes where the story is. And he is a story currently with the issues having Maiguru. So I think the media is doing a good job of seeing both sides of the issue. And as we go along, there needs to be that balance, as you're saying. We need to be able to we still need that connection, because we need to talk to them, we need to know what they're saying. At the same time, we need to be able to say, okay, we are independent, this is our view, and this is independent of you.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the fact that they've been called in for a meeting isn't itself a big deal. It's what actually happens during the meetings. One of the problems I have with this, and even at the time when they went to State House, is kind of the reluctance to challenge the people who were there during these meetings, because these are opportunities for the media to actually explore issues. You know, I would hope that they will be asking the opposition, I mean, querying its agenda, its plans, you know, what does it actually want to achieve, you know, and not just responding in the sort of usual thing we have of opposition says this, government says this, and we're stuck kind of in the middle, not knowing what it is, what the truth is, but to try and establish, you know, what are the facts that are there. You know, what are the policies, what are the proposals that come out of the opposition? In many cases, you never hear, you know, about what are the alternative proposals that they have. You know, are they going to be pushing some legislation in Parliament? You know, they speak a lot about a referendum. What are the actual details, you know, that people are going to be asked to vote on? You know, of late that has disappeared from the conversation. I would hope that would be restarted, and they would ask, you know, what do you do? Don't forget, the distinction that we have between media and opposition is to some extent a fiction, because these are parliamentarians, a lot of them, people in Parliament who pass laws, who have the ability to go out and propose laws, you know, that they want to pass, and to vet policy. So we've got to be asking them whether they are actually playing their roles, the roles that they have within government, as in the sense of within Parliament, and whether they're actually helping to check the excesses by government, what their plans would be going forward.
To add to what you just said, I do agree with the point that we need to challenge the opposition more on what their plans are. They often object, they're saying the teachers should be paid. They need to give us plans on how that would happen.
Where will that money come from?
Yeah, being that we understand now that the government has no money, and the cost would be to get that money. So they need to have their own plans and tell us what they do. I don't think you're doing a good enough job at challenging them at that.
Well, and also, if I may, on what you just said, I think it cuts both ways. Because if you were to ask me, I think the government has gotten a really easy ride with the press. You know, the assumptions that we take when it says it doesn't have money and we accept it doesn't. What we should be asking is what's it actually doing with the money it has. You know, such that it can now say we can't pay teachers. I was looking yesterday at the figures, and it's interesting when they say the country is 17 billion to pay teachers, but in the budget they've got 17 billion for laptops that they are not procuring. You know,
so you should be questioning that narrative.
Yes, let me just point out that it's not only the opposition meeting the editors. Tomorrow, editors also have another important meeting with the leadership of the Parliament, both the National Assembly and the Senate. And it shows you, I think people are beginning to realize the important critical role that Dr. Booker was talking about here, that media plays in society.
Okay, Claire, I wish Claire was here because it normally says journalists are not respected. So it looks like finally they are being respected for what they do, and that you cannot push an agenda effectively.
Meeting is different from
respect.
It could be that being used.
I think the meetings are good. You know, my hope is that you know, that whoever they're meeting, that media doesn't get too cozy with that. You know, that media still remains to play its role, and so that it's not too cozy either with the opposition or with the groups that it is meeting. And usually when media is called in to meet these people, of course, you know, as media, then we need to approach these meetings from a very objective standpoint, so that it doesn't sways from what we are supposed to be doing, and you know, telling the story. However unfavorably it's likely to project you that it actually does that.
But you know, my worry has been the way we perceive the media in Kenya. If you look at White House, and I have covered the White House 3 times on different occasions, there are resident reporters at White House. It's not a question of being cozy or not, but they do service to society. If you go to 10 Downing Street, there are resident reporters who cover the Prime Minister of UK on a day-to-day basis. So when they meet those in power or even those in the opposition, I think no eyebrows should be raised or question marks about being cozy. You may ask very tough questions, but you're still cozy anyway.
Well, the question is whether they actually ask those tough questions, and I think in a very real sense they don't. That a lot of stuff is allowed to sort of go on under the table because it's not actually questioned. We have this, as I said before, the sort of reportage that privileges the politics of things and not the issues that are there. So the media, I think, should stand in the position of the citizen. You know, it's the citizens' interests that they are to protect. You know, so that it doesn't matter what the government wants to say or what the opposition wants to say. You know, the fight between them, in a sense, is just a fight between those two. You know, it's the issues that matter should matter to the press, and that's what they should be pushing. You know, an understanding of, so that when people make decisions, whether it's at the ballot box or whether to write to their MPs or to whatever to complain, they have a basis upon which a good basic understanding of the issues that they can raise, how it matters to them.
All right, so evidently there's a lot of work to be done, and we'll be crossing live if the event starts while we're still here in the newsroom. If not, on KTN News, we'll certainly be filling you in on what will be going on there. But let's look at something else, and the plight of journalists. And looking at Geo TV, in India's largest private TV station, had a van attacked sometime last week, and a technician was killed. Then we also have in southern Sudan, Law, one of the renowned journalists who has hung his boots, so to speak, and not because he wants to, but because he feels his life is threatened. And we can also not forget that Sudan has had 7 journalists killed not too long ago, with the notion or the feeling of that which was said is that they were painting Sudan in bad light. Where does that leave journalism, and how is that likely to affect even the professionalism of journalists? I'll start with you, Ohito.
Thank you, Mike. That's a very critical question. I was at the World Editors Forum in Washington, D.C. in June, early June, and that question of freedom of the media, the independence of journalists in their reportage, was a critical discussion that we spent hours on. And across the world, it's becoming very difficult to be a journalist because you are targeted every other day. Close across our border in Somalia, it's almost impossible to practice as a journalist. There's no independence. Not even the radio stations, not even the people listening to you have the independence to listen to what you may want to say. Ethiopia has been a very bad example with dozens of bloggers and journalists behind bars. If you go to Uganda, when they see Kenyan style of journalism, they keep asking us, how dare you criticize the president? Rwanda, the media is either silenced or, panel beaten into saying things that would not happen. So across board Africa, for me, that's very critical still. There's really a breach on the independence of journalists.
Okay. Akilemi?
Well, first of all, I think we need to appreciate that things are better now than they were before in terms of the ways journalists can get out there. Before, a media house could be shut down, as happened here a couple years ago. But now with blogs, with other ways of getting your information out there, it's very hard to shut out information. So in a way that makes journalists safer because, that story is going to come out regardless, whether you like it or not. In terms of the safety of journalists, it goes to show the animosity that is there for journalists in general, even here in Kenya. And the reason they stand us as journalists is because they need us as well. But journalists are not people who they want to deal with because you ask questions that they don't want to answer. So we should appreciate that we have gone far in terms of how stories can come out. It's no longer traditional media that can release stories. Other people, citizen journalists can also release stories out there. And at the end of the day, the listener, the reader, the audience still gets the news. And that's something that we really need to appreciate.
Okay. Yeah. Dr. Buka, given that this seems to be a threat on the profession generally, and it's not just in Africa, I think it's world over, what's the way forward? And could this even be potentially killing very good journalists who would look at it and think, this is not a profession I'd like to get into, given the risks?
Well, it has an effect on that. When Ball hangs his boots and says, I would rather quit, I can't take these death threats anymore, and his family, has also come in support of the decision that he has made, it's very disheartening, because then the seasoned journalists, quitting the profession, spells doom for it. But it's not surprising that this is happening, because with the space that has been opened up and the freedoms or the gains that have been made in journalism over the years, makes governments, makes politicians, and some sections of the society intolerant of journalists. Gone are the days when you would try to stifle whatever it is that media is saying, and with that freedom, although in quotes, a number of people or sections of society would be intolerant. Hence, what we are seeing, and not even just the killing of journalists or the death threats, but some of the laws that are being proposed are in itself, killing the profession itself. So you might still be practicing journalism, but you're so stifled by the laws and regulations that are being proposed or that are being effected, so much so that you're not able to, to practice journalism within a free, environment. And so looking at killing journalism is not just the physical deaths of the journalists, but also the kind of space and the kind of regulations that are being put in place or that are being proposed that are likely to interfere with the freedoms that have been made, and not just here, but the world over. And so it's quite disheartening that the situation in South Sudan, and one of the questions the students always ask me is, what kind of terrain are we getting into? If those that have been there over the years are quitting, what's the place for me as a young upcoming journalist? Right. Should I just forget about this thing and get into public relations and that kind of thing? Mm-hmm. And so some of the very good people are leaving, right? And that's not a very good scenario.
Okay, but let's not forget that there are more journalists coming into the field as well. Even with all these dangers, we see students and we see people still wanting to go to Somalia, still wanting to go to Syria, still wanting to go to Sudan to report.
So do they know that what they're getting themselves into?
They do know what they're getting themselves into, but they still want to tell the story. Mm-hmm. So we still need to appreciate that more people are still going in, even with all the dangers.
Okay, I think what that means is that, for those that are getting in, that for them it's much more than, what's the gratification that they're getting out of it. And unless you feel called or very passionate about what you're doing, it becomes very difficult for you to survive.
But now, given that Ball actually in his statement says that it's something that it's a dream that he has always had, it's a passion that he has had, but his passion now has reached a point where threats have taken over. So really, is it about passion, or do we need to have certain stringent measures in place to ensure that we nurture those who have that passion?
But will we ever have enough? Can there ever be enough laws to protect a journalist?
I think the problem here isn't so much whether we have enough laws. It's whether the laws that are on the books are actually enforced, and whether actually the people who are the main targets of journalistic work, who are essentially the people who control the levers of power, can be made to be tolerant of criticism, and also to enforce the laws that protect journalists. Here in Kenya, we've had many cases of journalists being beaten up, and stuff, in the recent past. Mm-hmm. And what has come out of it, where is the pressure to actually enforce these laws, to actually ensure that journalists are protected? Don't forget, when we passed the Constitution, we made a special provision for the press, to say that they are protected. This is the will of the Kenyan people. We recognize that the media is important, in the work that it does. But that also brings to me a secondary issue, is what media does with the freedom that it actually already enjoys. For example, here in Kenya again, so if they're not seen to stand up to the powers that be, we are seeing, as Nancy has been saying, to be too cozy to them, then it removes the incentives for the public to stand up for the press, when it is threatened. So it's important. I'll just add one more thing. I think in my field of cartooning, I've just gone down to the U.S. for a conference organized by the Cartoonist Rights Network. And it was highlighting quite a lot of the threats that cartoonists face. We've got a guy called Zuna in Malaysia, who's facing 43 years in jail because of the cartoons he drew. We've got a lady in Iran, Atena Fagadani, who's been jailed for 12 years and 9 months actually, essentially for drawing Iranian MPs as monkeys and cows. And
could it be that it's that freedom that you're talking about?
Yes,
maybe
because
they have abused the freedom.
No, I mean, not really. This were fair comments. Atena, for example, was essentially commenting on the passage of a bill that was restricting women's rights access to contraception, and she was she made a comment on this using cartoons, the medium of cartoons. We draw a piece here every day, fairly regularly as pigs and stuff, no problem. The other thing is, the lawyer who went to see after she was sentenced and jailed, her lawyer went to see her, shook hands with her, and now she's facing, I think it's a further 4 years, for what they're calling indecent contact or something like that. It's ridiculous. It's all, essentially, it's all a way to intimidate, to stop people or to make people afraid to speak up.
But then the question might be, where do you draw the line?
Yes.
When it comes to now, because again, we must appreciate that they're operating in different countries, different laws. Maybe there are certain things which are not accepted, but where do we draw the line when it comes to getting a message across and not being derogatory or offensive?
There was talk about cartoons. This magazine, Charlie Hebdo, the one that was attacked last year. There was a drawing they had of the Minister of Justice as a monkey. Now, they said it was just in good fun, but this is France and the minister is black, so they drew her as a monkey. Many people were offended by that.
Right.
Is that right? I mean, where is the line? When do you say enough is enough?
And the same organization right now is in the spotlight, having drawn the child from Syria who was awash, the refugee crisis in Europe. And of course, the question is, where do you draw the line? Sometimes it gets to a point where it's inhumane.
Again, I think we have to make several distinctions here. There is, it's all satire essentially seeks to offend. Either you're offending the person you're satirizing, or you're offending society in general. Depends on what your objective is. The question is it illegal to offend? Is that what we're saying? In which case, that's a really broad brush to have.
The question is not whether it's legal, the question is ethically or morally right.
But when people are being jailed for drawing something, it's gone beyond simply saying that no, it's unethical, we don't like it. We are saying it is illegal. We are depriving people of the freedom to actually say this. But that's let me finish. Let me finish. With satire, you walk a fine line, and eventually you will offend. In fact, there's one guy who said, if you draw a cartoon that doesn't offend anyone, then it's not really a good political cartoon, which I subscribe to. I think you should be hard-hitting and go out and say the things that you want to say. There should not be the idea that if we offend certain people and they happen to be powerful, then they've got.
But what are those pictures saying? If it's about making a message, which is a message they're portraying?
Well, it depends on what the cartoon is. I can't comment on what the guy in Charlie Hebdo wanted to say. My question is, does he have a right to say it? And I think yes, he does.
Okay. All right.
I think what Gadara is not saying
is the fine line of ethics
is
and legal, not legal.
I think what Gadara is not saying is that even by the time we see the cartoon, sometimes there are very many editorial decisions that are made, and cartoons that maybe his first choice is not what gets carried. And so with that, then there's an assumption that there are certain ethical guidelines that even satire is guided by. Yes. But it doesn't mean that that they get away with everything. That there are certain instances where even satire can be unethical, and those have been some have been called out, and others haven't. But also being sensitive to the fact that within the newsrooms, that those cartoons are looked at very seriously before they're even published.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Hito, your take on cartoons and having that fine line between moral, ethical.
Let's first of all define caricatures or cartoons as content. When it is content, then it must be filtered. It must meet the threshold of ethics that goes into either the production of the bulletin or the newspaper itself, and which is why there must be serious editorial decisions taken. I can't count the number of cartoons which I have seen being dropped just before we go to press. It happens every other day, and any media house that does not do that, then
and what are the reasons for them being dropped?
When content, whether caricature or text or photographs, are aimed at inciting ethnic emotions, are aimed at, they are biased, they are not objective, then I feel they miss the standards that we should be applying. And we have run into lots of trouble. We all know what happened between Gado and the president of Tanzania next door here, and the reprisal effects that it came with. So caricatures, just like pictures, say more than 1,000 words. So how do we ensure that those kind of drawings or creative works do not pass the ethical borders?
They should not be done in a vacuum.
Here is something I really find weird. If you looked at Gado's cartoon of Kikwete, which was very similar to his cartoon of Ruto, essentially Kikwete being taken care of, that got banned. There was, I mean, really, I find it hard for an editor to be saying that that was a good thing that the people was kicked out of Tanzania because of
But he didn't say that. He said there were consequences.
Yeah, there were consequences. But this is what I'm talking about. Is should we not be saying that that consequence should not have happened? Instead of saying you should not have drawn the cartoon, you should not have expressed this opinion.
His point is that they should be not done in a vacuum. You should appreciate them in the context of where they're being presented.
Yes, but as part of content.
I mean, really, are you suggesting that we know the government doesn't like cartoons A, so that is our context?
No.
Of course not.
Given what's the objective of the cartoon?
What is the message?
What is the message that you're trying to get across?
Clearly, in Gado's cartoon, he was making fun of Kikwete. Clearly, he was saying that Kikwete is sort of being, what was it? Because he was on the table being kind of fun, treated almost like as an emperor stuff. He was ridiculing Kikwete's position. Now, surely you can't say that because Kikwete is sensitive about how he's drawn, that Gado should not draw him.
Okay, the issue is not just that particular cartoon, but we're talking about generally. When you talk about caricatures, should they also abide by certain rules?
And very pertinent question you are raising, and I blame these guys from the academia. You take students through text, photos, videos. I don't remember seeing a lesson on caricatures, and which is why we have problems. Should cartoonists be considered professionals in this trade that we're applying? No answer. Maybe they will tell us.
I've not been given a chance to respond.
Yes, so we come to you.
And that is the beginning of problem. It doesn't matter what kind of caricature you are bringing up, Gadara, my good friend, but when it evokes shows immorality, it incites ethnic and religious emotions, then I think it doesn't.
Political emotions?
Oh yes, you can get away with that.
Could I
but there should be a threshold. There should be a threshold. Dr. Buka, in terms of now training, is an artist qualified to be one who can draw a caricature
producer.
And a producer of content? Because really they are influencing and they are producing content. Is there training for them to have a certain threshold and a way of doing things, because you don't know where they're coming from?
From an ethical standpoint, yes. When media ethics is taught, you look at content in totality, whether it's pictures, whether it is text, whether it is the cartoons, all that comes into question. And Gadara knows that we have in this country had a conference that just looked at at cartoons. My own master's thesis is in cartoons and all that. So what we are saying is we might not have a course in caricature, because it's a very specialized area, and one really has to be passionate about it. But what the curriculum covers, at least let me speak for the institution that I work for, is that in the courses where we talk about media content, where we talk about ethics, that is part of what is covered. And the challenge then would be, and I guess this is something that going forward institutions that need to explore, is that for a number of people who end up you know, in cartooning are not necessarily journalists. You know, they come from, you know, from other areas. Yes. And the question then is, are they then equipped with you know, some ethical guidelines that then help them operate within that kind of
but that's why we have editors, because the role of the editor is to curate content.
To add what Daktari said, in our classes we teach our students that you cannot release something to the world and then run behind, I'm a journalist, don't prosecute
behind
me.
the fact that you're a journalist.
Yes, sometimes you have to look at what you're going to release and the consequences it will have, and decide whether or not it's worth taking it out. And that's what the ethics and Daktari is talking about.
If I may, I think I come from a very different standpoint. You know, first thing is who decides what actually is acceptable. With satire, I mean, you're always challenging these things. You know, you're always challenging either society's acceptors of things or individuals, what they are willing to take on. You know, we've had many cases of, even speaking from my own experience, of cartoons being sort of sidelined or not published because they were deemed to be too critical, you know, of the government or people who were there, which I find, you know, as justification, a very poor one. You know, I think my standpoint is we should start off with there is freedom to do what you want, to say what you want, to think what you want. Let me finish. There is freedom to do that. Doesn't mean that you should do it. You know, that I would agree with you.
Because freedom comes with responsibility.
Yes,
that's what we are questioning here.
But when it comes to a point where it is a state deciding what you can and cannot do, you are in big problems. Because that state is an interested party.
But we never argue that the state should be the one to decide.
That's what I'm saying. When I gave the example of Iran, that is a state deciding that you cannot do this. You know, it's not a nice discussion. People are in jail because of this.
True. And of course there are extremes, but the question here is, should there be moral guidelines that ensure this is not about Kenya, India, wherever. It's about the objective of the caricature and the cartoon.
No, I agree that there are ethical limits to what would be suitable to do. You know, these limits, I think, are negotiated within society itself. You know, and you will find, you will do a cartoon that somebody, lots of people will not like, perhaps the editor will not even let it through, you know. But I think we really have to interrogate the reasons why we impose these limits before we do. We have to be careful that what we are not doing is shrinking the space that we have under this banner of, well, it's actually not too nice, it's actually not that. I give an example of in the US, one final one. It's not even a cartoon. I'm sure many of you have heard of the case of Hustler Magazine versus Jerry Falwell, you know, where they actually ran an ad, a parody of a Campari ad, saying that the guy had had sex with his mother in a toilet. You know, totally untrue and stuff, but was deemed to be protected as political speech because this is a guy who had built up his reputation, blah, blah, blah. You know, the thing is, we have laws against libel. If you don't like what I'm saying, if you think it is untrue, you can take me to court for libel. Those laws exist. You know, no journalist is protected against that. But your opinion is totally protected. You know,
which brings me to the point that the editor decides. The editor takes responsibility. When the case of libel or defamation comes up, Gadara is just second respondent, the first guy on the line. Yes, and the editor has all powers to curate content. It doesn't matter whether
I agree, and as I said, I'm not here saying that libelous content is okay to go with. As I said, no journalist or no cartoonist is protected when he infringes the law on libel. But the libel is when you speak of facts. When you're speaking your opinion, you have freedom to your opinion, you have freedom to comment. You know, and we should be careful that in as much as we might say that there are social conventions that say you can't draw the president naked or you can't do 1, 2, 3, you know, that those conventions themselves are not used as a means to shut down a discussion or discourse.
But it's not just your opinion, it's a paper's opinion once it's published.
I think there are professional guidelines also that, I mean, I think we need to understand that cartoonists are not operating in a vacuum. And that part of that, it needs to be looked at in totality, that cartoon is part of content, you know, and the place, even where, you know, the cartoons are placed, you know, that very strategic. You
in
know.
fact, what would be the difference between a cartoon and a written content? The only difference is that one is left for you to interpret.
But if you ask that, then I mean, I ask that same question, and you suggest that the cartoons are the opinions of the paper. Not everything in the newspaper is the opinion of the paper. You know, the cartoonist is a contributor to the paper like everybody else. He is entitled to his opinion. The question is whether the newspaper will decide. Wait, let me finish. The question is whether the newspaper will decide, actually, we won't carry certain opinions. That is their decision to make, and they are quite legitimate in making it.
In making that decision.
But I would be very averse to seeing the state being the one deciding that.
It's not even the state. From where I sit, there's even more danger from private enterprises. You draw a cartoon about Kenya Airways, they make notes like, you know. So what I'm saying is that we must subject the creative works of cartoonists to the content curation process, and they must meet the standards.
They must meet the threshold. All right, let's move on to something else, and let's talk about documentaries. And there was a documentary that ran, Serve and Suffer, done by Dennis Okari over, I think it was on Saturday. And of course, when we're doing some of this reportage and bringing information to the public, especially on matters that are sensitive, and in this case to do with security, what the documentary was showing is some of the plight of our forces, some of them living in very dire straits and very dire conditions. Now the question is, at what point do we draw the line as journalists to ensure that we are also not exposing ourselves to the terrorists and arming them with information that would otherwise also be detrimental? Because of course, given that they can see, you know, some of the, if you look at some of the footage, there are points that would stop and, you know, you'd see the soldiers come out, and of course that is almost exposing how they do their work. Ohito?
That was a very critical question raised even during the rescue operation at Westgate. How and when do you turn on the lens? And yes, he may have done a good story in the eyes of others, but there were questions, why didn't he involve the guys in question? Why give them a chance to respond to the footage that has already been aired? Is Lamu really that bad? If you ask me, Kapedo is worse. And if you ask me, Mandera, you know, is in much worse condition than Lamu. And issues of national security and media coverage are one of the thorniest parts that journalists have treaded. And if you ask me, Ukari may have done a good job, but I think he needed to involve the officers at some point in the course of his story, and without necessarily exposing the weaknesses we may have on those fronts. If you ask me again and again, I don't think Lamu is that bad, and to that end, I think I would side with our state security agencies. They've done a fairly good job.
Dr. Booker?
I think first of all, it was a good story, highlighting the plight of the police officers who are working in that particular area. Of course, there are questions, and you know, with hindsight, then there could be certain angles to the story that he did not highlight. It's interesting that after the story aired, you know, now the security forces are acting, and we saw efforts to try and you know, repair the one vehicle that has not been working, and you know, some effort being made to try and make their lives a little better, and which points to, you know, why we need media, you know, because does it have to take such a story for you know, for the security, you know, for that to be sorted out? And so the more reason why you know, why we need the media. But I think the most important question here is when you cover security issues as a journalist? Are you sensitive to the plight, not just of the officers themselves, but also of exposing certain information, so much so that you advantage the enemy? And I know that he was very careful in some instances, but you could tell there was a struggle with regards to, how far do I go so that I don't expose these people. For example, I know he didn't talk about where they even spend the night, at the end of the day, to try and protect them. But it raises a lot of issues, and I keep saying this, that that's one of the areas that even for us in training is a new area, even in terms of teaching. You cannot cover terror, you cannot cover security issues like you cover any other story. And I think a lot still needs to be done on our side, and even in terms of our own capacity as faculty to be able to to help our students understand that if that's the terrain that you're going, then there are certain sensitivities that you need to take into account. And I think we have learned, there have been lots of interesting case studies. Westgate in itself is a case study, that we use a lot even in teaching to try and make make this a little more manageable.
Okay. Mwenda Kilemi, your take on that?
I think the plight of the police and the security forces is something we need to cover more and more. They are protecting us, but their conditions are not that good. The coverage of Westgate, Garissa, and this kind of story show that if we give enough coverage, positive and negative coverage, the police can do a better job of improving. So we covered inconsistencies in Garissa and Westgate, and we hope the government has done its job in covering up those areas. What I will agree with the editor is that we should have had more from the police. What do they have to say about this? We shouldn't hear it after the fact.
Sure.
Let's hear it, so it doesn't seem like it's biased, because they could make the argument this is not a fair story. We have our side, how come it wasn't provided?
And nobody came to us to get their story. Kadara?
I think I agree with Kilemi, what he said about the story itself not being rounded out, and I've also wanted to hear what Commissioner of Police or the IGP had to say about the scenario there and stuff. But I'm a bit wary when journalists become co-opted as kind of spokesman or vessels through which the government tells its bit. The fact is, in operations such as Westgate and Garissa, there are multiple failures.
Yes.
And what the government tries to do is to say that this is a sensitive issue, you shouldn't report it.
Don't talk to us about it.
Don't talk about it. To cover up, it's not so much that it's sensitive, it's to cover over its own failures.
Mistakes,
it tried it in Westgate, it tried, and if you compare Westgate and Garissa, you find they were pretty much the same thing, And this is what we should be careful. Journalists should be in the business of exposing that which government doesn't want exposed, not in the business of protecting it. And I think it's up to the government to protect that which it thinks is sensitive. The journalist's job is to actually find out what are they covering up, and how does it affect everybody else, and what should.
But evidently a challenge still in training, especially with security, because this is it seems to morph and change as time goes on, so it becomes more and more sensitive. I want us to wind up, but one more picture. We're talking about ethics and meeting a certain threshold, and there's a picture I wanted us to just get your comments on, and on whether it should have appeared on the front page of the Star. This was on the Star yesterday, and it was a lady who was protesting the fact that the rape cases were taking very, very long. We talked about ethics, and should this be a picture that should be on the front page? Dr. Buka, your take. I mean, she's protesting the fact that rape cases do take long, and it gets your attention, that's for sure, but do we get the right message from it?
I don't think we get the right message, from that picture. I don't know why you start with B.
I think he gets the point. I didn't think it offended were old men.
No, offend me as a lady.
I have nothing. She made the point. I got to look at the photo and I wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah, but I'm offended as a lady, you know, by that picture. You know, I think the message could have been passed.
Why do you find it offensive?
I mean,
because it is a lady. I mean, it is a lady who's doing that. So
spreading her leg. What's the problem? And here's my issue.
On the front page.
Yeah, but here's my issue. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you had published it on page 30. The picture is a picture.
And we're talking about it now because of that. It's an issue.
Let's hear about Buka. Finish.
Yes, I mean, I'm uncomfortable with the picture and I'm entitled to my opinion. So they will speak when it is their turn, you know. But I just think that, you know, I think the Star could have chosen a better picture instead of that.
That was the best.
Yeah.
I have no problem with the pictures. My problem again comes back to this academics. They've never defined which is the border point when it gets to use of these pictures. There are days we say we cannot use photos of the dead on the front page. If Mohammed Amin did not use pictures of dead Ethiopians on front pages of world media newspapers, nobody would have moved to save Ethiopia from hunger. So, and no academic has come to argue out this.
Okay.
That was the day of
I'm here.
of the fire down at the pipeline. In Nation and Standard said we are very ethical. We are not going to use those pictures. The Star used the pictures of the dead on page 1, and the stay on the street was Standard, Nation, compromise. The Star told us the truth.
Okay, that was right there. Okay, lady and gentlemen, we'll have to wind it up right there. Time is up. Patrick Gadara, who is a communications consultant, a cartoonist as well. Thank you. David Kilemi, who is a lecturer with University of Nairobi, Communications Department. Dr. Nancy Buka, who is chair of the Media Department, Multimedia University, and David Ohito, who is digital editor here with the Standard. Thank you very much. That is where we wind up the newsroom and Morning Express this morning. Thank you for keeping us company. Do stay with us right here on KTN News. Sophia Onuna will be giving us the bulletin at exactly 8 o'clock. From us, we say good day. Have yourselves a good day and God bless.
just take the mic around and you will give us your name and where you work. And then I also need to notify you that I think at least one camera is live, one station, KTN is live. So be aware of that. So I'll begin with this table. Yeah, there. Let's begin with the introduction.
Good morning. My name is Mark for Nation Media. My name is Mendez, the Media District Future Service and Media National.
Good morning. My name is Robin Zoku and I work for Royal Media Center.
Morning. My name is Okwema David. I work for Star Newspaper.
Morning everyone. My name is Kajaku Muchino. I work for the Standard Group.
Morning. My name is Jane Godia. I work for African Women and Child Feature Service and Assistant Treasurer, Kenya Editors Guild.
Could I request that you get up as you speak? I can see the PM struggling to see who is talking.
Good morning. My name is Jane Godia. I work with African Women and Child Feature Service and I'm also the Assistant Treasurer, Kenya Editors Guild. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Matenge, currently CM Journalist of the Year.
Habari za asubuhi. Naitwa Juma na Mlola na nafanya na Taifa Leo. Good morning guys. My name is Tim Wanyoni. I work for Nation Media. Franco Jambo Media Consultancy. I am Martin Masai, member of the guild, and I serve Bank of Friend as the CEO. My name is Louis Ekari, chairman of the committee.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Lindo. I work at Capital Fund, but I'm also the secretary of the Bank Trust. Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Ilado. I work for the government.
Good morning. My name is Samuel Maina, American Chief NBC, Vice Chair, Kenya Editors Guild.
Get up, just stand up and speak.
I'm never going to. And the judge was over there. We report our development.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Maurice Sereta. I work with One FM.
Good morning. My name is John.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ken Muga. I work with One FM.
My name is Roger. I work with
Good morning. My name is Maurice Ochil. I am Programs Controller for 97th and 12 FM, 87.7 QFM, and 91.5 Hits FM.
My name is Michelle Ngede, a reporter with KTN. Good morning. Journalists of News and Media Services.
Samuel Tamanja, English reporter.
Hope you're having a brilliant morning. My name is Trevor Mbija, NTV anchor and reporter.
My name is Henrique Camille, Nation FM.
I'm Sam Mura. I'm a reporter and podcast activist.
I'm Rosalie Obana. I work with the Standard Newspaper and I'm current chair of the Kenya Parliamentary Association.
morning, everyone. I work with Media Max.
I am Eric Diego, is reporter KBC.
Well, thank you very much. I guess the guys with the cameras will not introduce themselves. That's fine. So as you can see from our side, we are deliberately thin. We with the Honorable Junet Mohammed, the MP for Suna East, who I know is a friend to almost everyone in the media. We deliberately decided to be thin, just the 2 or 3 of us, so that we cut down on the speeches and create time for enough time to explore all the issues that we'd want to be explored. So without much ado, I want to invite the chairman of the Editors Guild to make some few remarks on the behalf of the editors. Then I will invite Junet Mohammed, and then we'll have our host talk to us. So, Linus.
Good morning. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning. Thank you very much, Dennis. And mine will be very brief. The Honorable Raila Odinga, Honorable Junet, the members of the executive of the Editors Guild, the editors present, and my colleagues, journalists, cameramen, all present. I'll be very brief. When we got this note asking us for a meeting with the Honorable Odinga, we asked them the reporting team, for example, is quite new, very young, and a lot of them are probably meeting you for the first time at close range. We at the Editors Guild are happy to receive you this morning, and we are looking forward to hearing on a number of issues. Mine would just be to challenge you this morning to also focus and tell us a bit about your take on the performance of the opposition. We've heard you a lot of times on what you feel about the performance of the government. We would like this morning to also hear your assessment of the opposition. And I say this because for some of us who have covered events for a long time now, we feel, for example, that this country is going through a very rough patch when it comes to leadership. The quality of debates in Parliament is at its lowest ever. And I mean from both ends of the House. We'll be happy to hear your assessment on big national issues and the opposition's approach to that. In other places, developed democracies, we normally do have that alternative voice on almost every issue. We've just seen a seismic change in the United Kingdom. That leadership appealed to during the campaigns. We are seeing a very interesting election coming up in the United States, where what is happening is the norm is being assaulted. It's not about normal things anymore. It's about new things. And this is coming from the electorate. We want to hear what is Kenya's alternative when it comes to the voice of the opposition. Because one unfortunate observation I make is that opposition and government politics in Kenya are all centered around winning elections. There is no agenda in between. The other day, we went through the budgeting process. We did expect that the opposition can actually put what they would call an alternative budget. None of that came through. This tells us that despite many years of democracy, we are not really where we should be. We are not really where we should be as a country. The growth is marginal. We've done the same things every year, every election after from 1992 to 2013. And we would like to hear from you. What does the future look like, especially for the opposition? Because we do not believe it should only be about winning elections. It should also be about the period in between. We have a lot of challenges facing the country right now, and there are not a lot of sober voices out there. We have the teacher strike, which has paralyzed public schools, and there is lack of urgency on both sides of our democracy as to how this issue should be resolved. I wonder why. Is it because the majority of those affected are really the common people? This had been the approach if there was a shutdown of the suburbs of Nairobi. Would we still lack the urgency that we seem to lack when it comes to the teachers' issues? I also note with sadness the tone of the conversation. It was very good to see the courts coming up yesterday as a sober voice of things, when it told the teachers to tone down the demonstrations and government to stop a language of intimidation. Because we are becoming a country where arrogance is becoming part of our culture. It should be clear to everybody that teachers actually went to court and won a case. And that is where the conversation should start. We'll also be happy to hear a sober argument from the government when it comes to the issue of affordability of these salaries. It should not be an arrogant response, a dismissive response, because we haven't seen the same language attending to demands for salaries in other sectors. Members of Parliament, for example, add their salaries and nobody arrogantly answers them or dismisses them. I think this should be about dialogue. Like I noted recently, the teacher's question is as long as some of our careers. I covered the first strike in as a junior reporter, and we stand here today, the same issues unresolved. And we think the quality of our engagement, the quality of our public discourse needs to be reassessed. We are a country of quarrels. We need to tone down. We need to talk. And we need to hear sobriety. And maybe I would mention at this point one very moving image yesterday we saw. Politicians rarely display a genuine face. But last night I think we saw one in the face of an MCA called Ngige from Wiki, who went to school and taught students. With all honesty, I don't think he was doing this for politics. It was a small act, but it demonstrated leadership, sobriety, and sensitivity to the situation. The children who are out there missing schools are children of real human beings. They are people just like the rest of the Nairobi upper classes that are so insensitive about what is going on. Honorable Odinga, looking forward to hearing from you on a number of these issues, and I will really look forward to hearing on the quality of discourse that we have in this country, because it's been causing a lot of concern. And for some of us who have been following events for a long time now, we think we are really decline. We are on the decline. We look forward to hearing from you, and I thank all my colleagues for turning up, and we look forward to a very constructive engagement. I would say very little about our media space. We are, of course, very concerned about I will just say, like I usually do, that it's too late to turn the clock. If you don't like media freedom, you may have to consider leaving this country, because it's part of our life. We will be there as a free and independent media, and that is our lifestyle. It's our Kenyan way. So we don't lose sleep over some of the clauses that are introduced in bills that target media freedom. We don't lose our sleep, because we know it's not going to work. We had a very liberating constitution passed in 2010, and that, going forward, is the Bible of this country. It is the covenant of the people of this country, and that covenant assures our space as media. We will be free, and we must be free to do our job. I thank you all. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Linus. It looks like it's going to be an interesting discussion. I think you set the tone, and let me have Junet Mohammed just take up from there and invite Honorable Odinga.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Good morning, everyone. As has been said, my name is Honorable Junet Mohammed. I represent a constituency called Suna East in Migori County, and also I am official of the largest party in the region, ODM. Today, to share with you a few insights on, before I take the pleasure to invite the right. Well, I would like to thank all of you, because without the media, I don't think this country will have come this far. We've seen the way media, highlights issues that are of importance to the country, even at the parliamentary level where we operate, and we must be very grateful to them for the good. There are a few issues that I think we need to put across, so that you may look at it objectively and see whether we can go along together in addressing them. Some of the issues, one of them is the issue of objectivity, in terms of sometimes when the media is addressing certain issues, sometimes you lose sight of the objectivity of the matter, and then it ends up becoming the narrow spectrum of the debate. I myself has participated in many debates, both in the print media and the broadcast media. Sometimes you lose, the spectrum becomes narrow, where you don't get the expert opinion, you don't get the real issues out. Case in example where we are internalizing at the party level was the sugar issue, because we believe that we've lost sight of the real issue. It was very, very important to this country. affects the economy of many, many people that we represent. And the real issues didn't come out. We felt that it was taken to a narrow perspective where the government thought that we are talking just because of politics, but we were talking on serious economic issues that are affecting people that we represent, like my place where 50% of my people are sugarcane farmers. So we need the media to help in bringing the experts, in bringing the real matter out, so the government can get senses into their heads that this is not politics, but this is about the lives of the people. The other issue is the issue where sometimes you feel the media becoming shy of blaming the government and its failures, to the extent where sometimes there is unwritten doctrine that's coming up saying we must share the blame. The opposition and the government needs to share the blame, because you see a serious issue that needs to be addressed by the government, and they will ask you, what is the opposition doing about it? Now, like teachers strike now, teachers need to be paid. The opposition does not operate the treasury of the country. They can only give their views, and that it's a legal matter. Teachers have won the case at the Supreme Court, kindly pay them. That's the level that the opposition can reach. But some of the times you interact with the media, they will ask you, what is the opposition doing about it? I don't think the opposition can do anything about it, to be honest with you. So sometimes this sharing of blame, we need to be apportioned blame where if the opposition is wrong on an issue, they should be told, this one, you are wrong on. But if the government also because they should do their work. I just want to comment as a member of parliament on the issue of the budget. You know, this constitution that we got in 2010 really changed the way parliament operates from the parliamentary system, more of kind of previously that to a parliamentary to a presidential system, where all members of parliament, opposition or from government, you are members of a committee. The budget committee has 51 members, consisting of both members of parliament from the opposition and members of parliament from the ruling parties. Now, you do your work and you discuss the budget and you give your views within that committee. So, members of parliament of the opposition have participated in making that budget at the parliamentary level, except sometimes when there are divergent views and they are put on a vote, so when maybe the issue of misuse of tyranny of numbers comes in, and maybe your opinion is not counted or is not taken in properly or for selfish interest. But the opposition still can provide an alternative government at the party level. I think the Prime Minister will give more insight into that. Lastly, I sit in the Energy and ICT Committee of Parliament, and that's where the media also falls. And when we were making the laws like the Kicker Bill and the Media Bill last time, I remember meeting the media owners and the Editors Guild differently. And I can tell you without the fear of contradiction, those two groups have different agendas for this country. The Media Owners Association were not so much concerned about issues of, gagging the media, issues of, freedom of the speech and freedom of the media. How much money they make at the end of the year. That's what they were looking at, from what I read from their minds when they were talking to us. But the Editors Guild were more serious about the freedom of the media, opening up of the space. So you people also must draw a line as people who run the media, where the owners their rights should stop and the Editors Guild rights should start from, so that we can have a more vibrant country than we have today. So with those few remarks, it is my honor and pleasure to invite the Prime Minister so he will address us. Thank you so much. The Prime Minister, Karim.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeanette. The Chairman, the Secretary, and members of the fourth estates, or the paparazzi. Good morning. Let me say I was rather surprised at the turnout. I would say pleasantly surprised. Because I thought that I was going to be sitting down here with about 5 or 6 people talking. But now I have a room full of members of the Fourth Estate. So I'm pleased and I want to welcome you to this morning's meeting. This is not a White House correspondence dinner, you know, which is held every year, where the issue at times are very light talking, with a lot of jokes. I remember last year when I was in the US and Obama invited the members of the Fourth Estate, he cracked a lot of jokes. One of them was that you, ladies and gentlemen, have discovered too late, after 6 years, that you have had a Kenyan in the White House. Then he went on, but he said that it's going to be very difficult for you later on to tell Americans that Hillary Clinton was born in Kenya. Okay? Now, I thought that it was necessary sometimes to compare notes, and that's why I decided to invite you. And many faces are familiar here. People we go back a long time with. Remember, Linus was a very young, he used to call him boy, struggling here before he went to South Africa. He's now matured. I was telling him how I enjoyed eating nyama in his home there with his parents when I went to open his house in those years. So, and Odhiambo here has been there for quite some time. He was also a young boy, an old man with very few hairs on top. But this, your profession, like others, is like a stream or a river that is flowing. That there is headwaters which are almost reaching the ocean or the lake, and there's other fresh waters coming from the mountains coming. And there's a continuous stream of new people joining the profession. I see so many young people out there who hope to make a career in journalism. So that's why it is always necessary to each time to renew these acquaintances. I'm not here to give you a lecture, but rather to share some thoughts on the emerging and lingering national issues and to hear from you. And as I've said, I'm thanking you. The media, as you all know, remain an important contributors to the search for solutions and to many challenges facing our country. Even when we read from different scripts, as we sometimes do, I retain the faith that by and large, all journalists wake up every morning and intend to do a good job for them. But they have to face a society as it is, not as it should be. I believe you are doing your part for our people by reporting on our challenges and progress, sometimes under very difficult circumstances. You have done a good job in documenting the mega corruption dodging our country and explaining the man-made problems that marred the 2013 general elections. I have admired the courage of the courage and the coverage of the counties across the media, how you have dealt with issues in our newly created counties. Whether you have exposed the rising costs of wheelbarrows or the untwisting and impeachment of governors, or the cost of setting up a Facebook account, The coverage of counties has helped to underscore the fact that there are two levels of government in Kenya now, and that both are critical to our success as a nation. I know what you go through in the process of telling stories critical to the rich and the powerful in our country. I know that you face very many challenges there. I know those among you who have been threatened, arrested, beaten, attacked, and in some cases even killed by simply doing their best to bring us the story and to give the people a voice and hold leaders accountable. We may continue challenging you about the rationale for the unchanging opinion poll question, which is all the times about Raila's future in politics. Should he continue or should he retire? And I ask those questions, delay. Generally, however, I recognize that you have demonstrated leadership by critically distilling the major issues facing us, and you should continue to do so. As Kenyans, we are looking for a society that is free, democratic, fair, and just, that offers opportunities for advancement to all its people. We will not always agree on how to get to that kind of society. Everybody sees it from a different perspective. We have also been accused of ever being critical of the government and offering no solutions. That is us as opposition. Many times, we offer many solutions alongside the criticism, though we believe we are not a consultancy for the government. We are not really supposed to be a consultancy for the government. When we believe we are right, as times has proved we were on the current NYS saga, we stand our ground. This is partly why I asked for this meeting. Our country is going through challenging times. As insecurity has exploded, we have asked for the involvement of the county government in addressing the problem of security, because we believe that security, as other sectors of our economy, should also be devolved so that the governors and their officers get to know what is happening in the counties. That's why we are proposing a security, a county security committee chaired by the governor. We have also asked for the completion of the security sector reforms as envisaged in the Constitution. We have also called for a program of winning the hearts instead of antagonizing communities as we confront terrorism. We have called for a coordinated approach to the war on corruption, because corruption must be fought through properly organized institutions, not by merely making pronouncements and chest thumping. There have been deliberate attempts through legislation to roll back democratic space, including the media freedom. And this you have already, Linus has talked about. And for this, as you know, we have gone to court, and the courts have agreed with us. Devolution has not been fully accepted by everyone, and so county governments that are the most critical aspect of our constitution are struggling. I've been saying it several times that devolution in this country has many enemies, and many and powerful enemies. Some of them are silent, but they are very lethal. An example I want to give you is when we were at Bomas, the chairman of the then devolution committee, the late Dr. Odhiambo Mbai, was assassinated brutally in his residence road by people who have never been brought to book up to now. They were arrested, the suspects were arrested, were arraigned in court. At the end of the day, the police officers who were investigating are the ones who eventually found themselves in court. We have consistently appealed to the government to meet the constitutional obligation of releasing specified percentage of the budget to the counties in a timely and predictable manner. We have equally called for an increase in the amount to the county to secure devolution. You will see the orchestrated campaign to transfer back health services back to the national government. It is deliberate. It is basically being orchestrated by forces that do not want devolution. Because it's not that there's no capacity at the county government. How do you expect the county to pay salaries to the doctors and nurses when money has not been released? The arrangement was that the money was supposed to be transferred to the counties on a quarterly basis. Then you can plan with it. But if you live from hand to mouth, the salary has not come from the treasury, it's being brought in and dribs and drabs, the services must suffer. The contractors are also not being paid. It's not only the nurses that are not being paid and the doctors. But despite the rosy picture we are given, our economy is in bad shape. And this you can take to the bank, because I talked to experts, senior experts. Public debt has doubled and foreign debt has overtaken domestic debt. We're borrowing and spending at an unsustainable rate. We're experiencing wage pressure and it will continue. The standoff between teachers and the national government currently underway might just be the beginning. As the shilling takes a beating, we should expect that more workers will demand to be cushioned through pay rises. Today the shilling is, I think, 105. And I'm told in another few weeks it's going to be 110. We have called on the national government to be prudent in the use of funds and especially in borrowing. We have also asked the government to embrace the devolution as a way of containing the wage bill. The wage crisis is a result of a national government failure to adjust and align itself to the Constitution. The national government is retaining and paying an estimated 60,000 workers who have been made redundant by devolution. They are ballooning the wage bill. The standoff with the teachers is the most unfortunate because it also raises fundamental questions about the rule of law. Can a government go against a Supreme Court ruling and still enforce the same rule of law? We doubt it. And I've been saying that this government is a product of a Supreme Court ruling. You remember that we did challenge the results of the elections in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court dismissed part of our evidence, saying that it was time-barred. And then went on to legitimize this government. We said we don't agree, but we respect the rule of the court, the verdict of the court. That's how it should be. That you can never say, I'm not going to respect the rule of the court. Can't pay and won't pay. Then if you can't pay and won't pay, then go home. Because if that is going to be applied by every other member of the citizen, then it's going to be anarchy, which will reign. You must come up and say, the court has ruled, we respect the ruling of the court, we are going to work on the modalities of how to deal with this, or we are going to challenge it, the ruling, in this way or the other way. The strike also puts focus on the style of our politics and the need for us to embrace a culture of consultations. It reminds us of our call for a dialogue last year We are no longer interested in that. And we believe that had the state allowed a dialogue at that time, it would have set a positive trend through which we could resolve so many emerging issues, including the ongoing strike. We clearly need humility in government. You remember, we said, let's sit down and dialogue. And there are several issues that are required to be talked about. After 5 years of this new constitution, it's obvious that there are areas which need to be addressed. The role of parliament, the executive vis-a-vis parliament, and the issues of security, the issues of devolution, what need to be devolved, what should not be devolved, all that require an assessment after this experiment. But of course they said, no, there's no need for dialogue. These people are only interested in Musumukati, and therefore we will not talk. We are also now saying we don't want to talk anymore. As we grapple with the strike, and the government maintains it has no money, we must recall that Kenyans are yet to know what the government did with the $2.15 billion of Eurobond money. I'm saying how part of that money was used is known, and it is in the Auditor General's report. And that the issue of the interest from the offshore account where that money was banked, which is still hanging out there, and that runs into billions of shillings. Who ate that money? There's a question that has not been answered. Yet an attitude of chest thumping, take it or leave it, arrogance, permeates all state operations, especially in moments of crisis. The president raised the bar and at some stage personally stated that he did not know who was innocent and who was not when he asked a bunch of state officers to step aside over corruption. Now look at the NYS saga. We were called names when we said money had been. The Director of Criminal Investigations has since confirmed that a lot of money was lost. That means the Cabinet Secretary, and I have nothing personal against Madam Anne Waiguri, was involved in a cover-up and conspiracy to subvert the course of justice. When she came and stood before the media with a straight face and said no money was lost, that she nipped it in the bud. Yet last Friday, she was reading a statement to you people saying that so much money was lost. And nobody, no journalist could remind her what she said only a few weeks ago. The question then is, what was her interest in misleading the Kenyan public? What is the relationship between the Cabinet Secretary and these NYS deals? What is her relationship with the culprits? We know that the CS, the Cabinet Secretary appointed a Mr. Adan Harake as Deputy Director General of NYS, then took authority to incur expenses from the Director, Mr. Nelson Githinji, the head of NYS, to Mr. Harake. That AIE is what was used to steal the money. Is this an innocent coincidence? What justifies her continued use, where she continues to use public resources to defend herself? Look at it this way. She says that she nipped in the bud. She informed the CID to come and investigate. The CID has investigated. So if thieves are broken in your house and have stolen properties, and you go to the police and report the theft, police carry out investigations and arrest the thief. Do the police bring the thief back to you? They take or the report. They take the thief to court and charge the thief. Why did the CID take the report back to Mrs. Waiguru? Why did they not arrest the culprits and take them to court and charge them? Ask yourself. It was not the CID reporting the theft. It was the same when the guru was calling the media to say, yes, there was theft here. We were at a time when these people should have already been in court. When we look at the crisis grounding the nation, the thread that runs across is the absence of humility. The government is a powerful instrument, but best government exhibits humility. We need humility in government. The attitude of we are in power, what we need do is driving us to a ditch. It is in the case of teachers. It is evident in the case of the NEWSROOM saga, where you see it with the war on terror and in the recent changes in the police service. The police service where the Deputy Inspector General of Police is just to pack up and go. You have been appointed as an ambassador. Not even, she's not even told ambassador to where. The ambassador. And then another director of anti-terrorism unit is also told you are an ambassador. Just like that. Yet you are somebody who is holding a constitutional office, a contract running for 5 years, up to 2018. And by the time you're being given a contract under Mr. Kibaki, Mr. Odinga, your age was known. You're now told you've reached 60 years of age, pack up and go home. As opposition, we believe we have played a very patriotic and responsible role in the evolving chain of events, the end of which we are yet to see. The burden is really on the government. But let me now make some few remarks on what Leonard has talked about. One is the role of the opposition under the new constitutional dispensation, because you know that the situation has changed dramatically, where now we have a situation where there's a separation of powers between the legislature, the executive, and the opposition, which was different, because last time we didn't have executive also partly in the legislature. The president was a member of parliament.